The wealthy elites of Manhattan think money buys silence. They believe a non-disclosure agreement and a seven-figure wire transfer can erase any crime. They're wrong. Money only buys time, until someone like me shows up to collect the interest. My name is Gidan Vance. For 10 years, I led Black Ops military units through war zones the U.S. government pretends don't exist. Now, I run Vance Global, the most expensive, ruthless private security firm in North America. When billionaires are terrified of the dark, they call my phone. 3 hours ago, I wasn't hired to eliminate a terrorist or extract a diplomat. I was hired by Arthur Sterling, a corrupt Wall Street hedge fund titan, to neutralize a security threat. The threat? A 25-year-old woman sitting in a sunlit glass office on the 50th floor of a midtown skyscraper, casually drinking an iced matcha latte while draining Sterling's offshore accounts at a rate of $2 million a minute. I breached her private office with 4 armed operators behind me. I expected a panicked corporate spy. I expected someone trembling, ready to surrender. Instead, I met Vivian Moreau. She didn't jump. She didn't flinch. She simply rotated her leather armchair, looked up from her triple monitor setup, and swept her sharp hazel eyes over my 6'4" frame. She wasn't built like the starved, hollowed-out runway models who usually parade through Manhattan galas. Vivian was breathtakingly curvy. Full-figured, lush, with unapologetic curves accentuating a tailored emerald green silk blouse that hugged every inch of her soft, regal shape. She looked like a Greek goddess who had walked off a pedestal and decided to break Wall Street for fun. "You're late, Mr. Vance," she said. Her voice was pure velvet, laced with absolute confidence. "I expected Arthur's lapdogs 20 minutes ago. Did the elevator give you trouble?" My operators raised their weapons. I held up one hand, signaling them to stand down. There was no fear in her eyes, only intellect. Pure, dangerous intellect. I stepped closer, letting the shadow of my physical presence fall over her desk. Most men use their size to intimidate women like Vivian. They try to make them feel small. But Vivian didn't shrink. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her legs, and smiled. A slow, dangerous smile that made my pulse do something it hadn't done in a decade. "Miss Moreau," I said, my voice echoing low in the quiet room, "you're currently committing federal wire fraud. Arthur Sterling paid my firm $500,000 to seize your hard drives and deliver you to a private holding facility in upstate New York." She let out a soft, musical laugh that cut right through the tension. "Wire fraud?" she echoed, tilting her head. "Check your phone, Commander." I pulled out my encrypted tactical tablet. The screen wasn't showing her arrest warrant. It was showing Arthur Sterling's tax evasion files, his illegal offshore holdings in the Cayman Islands, and a paper trail proving he had stolen $70 million from the pension funds of 3,000 middle-class American families, including Vivian's late mother. "I'm not stealing his money, Gidan," she whispered, using my first name like she had known me for years. "I'm returning it to the families he destroyed. Arthur Sterling used his legal team to call me fat, emotional, and irrelevant when I tried to whistle-blow 2 years ago. He thought a curvy woman with a laptop couldn't touch his empire. So tell me, are you going to stop me, or are you going to stand there and watch me finish?" I looked at the data scrolling across her screens. Then I looked at her. In my line of work, loyalty is tied to contracts. But honor? Honor is tied to blood. Arthur Sterling was a parasite hiding behind expensive lawyers and private security. Vivian Moreau was a force of nature. Brilliant, fiercely independent, and utterly captivating in her defiance. I reached out, placing my large, warm hand over her soft fingers on the mouse. Her skin was warm, contrasting sharply with my cold, leather tactical gloves. She didn't pull away. She looked up at me, her chest rising and falling as our eyes locked. "You missed a hidden trust account in Zurich, Miss Moreau," I whispered, leaning down until my breath brushed the shell of her ear. "Subaccount 409. It holds 12 million. Let me unlock the firewall for you." Her eyes widened slightly, a flush of crimson rising on her cheeks. "You're violating your contract," she murmured. I straightened up, turning toward my team. "Contract is cancelled," I ordered, coldness dripping from every word. "Secure the floor. If Arthur Sterling or any of his men set foot in this building, put a bullet in their tires and throw them off the property." The room went silent again. Vivian turned her chair around, staring at me as if trying to re-engineer my brain. "Why did you do that?" she asked softly. "Arthur Sterling will burn your reputation for this." I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling glass window, looking out over the sunlit skyline of New York City before turning back to her. "Sterling has money, Miss Moreau. But you have power. And more importantly, you belong under my protection now." I took off my tactical gloves and tossed them onto her desk. "Arthur Sterling just realized he sent a wolf to catch a fox," I said, my voice echoing deep and final. "And now, the wolf is hungry." At that exact moment, my encrypted comms vibrated. Arthur Sterling was on the line, screaming that he had just dispatched a rogue hit squad to Vivian's private residence in the Hamptons. He didn't know. He just signed his own death warrant. When a woman possesses the brilliance to break an empire and the pride to stand tall against the world, is it control to stand by her side, or is it the ultimate form of loyalty? What would you sacrifice to protect the only person who holds your soul? Threat assessment is simple math. When a desperate billionaire realizes his fraud is exposed, he stops using lawyers and starts using muscle. Arthur Sterling thought sending 4 mercenaries to Vivian's Hamptons estate would destroy her servers and force her into silence. He didn't account for the fact that my private chopper was already 10 minutes ahead of them. Vivian sat across from me in the leather cabin of my Sikorsky helicopter, her high-powered laptop balanced on her lap, fingers flying across the keys at a dizzying speed. The bright afternoon sun streamed through the cabin window, illuminating every soft, breathtaking contour of her face and the rich, lush curves of her waist. Most women in her position would be crying, panicking, or asking for protection. Vivian? She was rerouting Sterling's personal offshore wire transfers while drinking sparkling water. "You're staring, Commander," she said, without looking up from her code. Her tone was laced with that unapologetic, velvety confidence. "Is my posture wrong? Or are you just wondering how a curvy woman in a silk dress is dismantling a Wall Street empire from a helicopter?" I racked the slide of my custom .45 caliber pistol, the metallic sound echoing in the pressurized cabin. "I'm looking at a woman who doesn't realize she's walking into a kill zone," I replied, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous vibration. "Sterling's men aren't corporate security, Vivian. They're ex-cartel enforcers. They don't take prisoners." She tilted her chin up, looking straight into my eyes. No flinching, no weakness. "Let them come, Gidan," she whispered softly. "My mother died in a cold hospital room because Sterling's firm denied her pension fund payout to boost their quarterly dividend. I didn't spend 5 years mastering data architecture to back down from a few thugs with cheap weapons." We touched down on the private helipad of her Hamptons estate at 2:15. Sun-drenched glass architecture, ocean breeze, total isolation. Waiting at the entrance was Marcus, Vivian's lead security detail and a former Marine recon scout I had trained a decade ago. "Boss!" Marcus called out, his tactical vest tightened, face pale. "2 black subs just breached the perimeter gate down the driveway. They're armed with automatic rifles. We're outnumbered 4-1. I didn't slow my pace. I grabbed Vivian by the waist, my large hand spanning the soft curve of her hip, pulling her flush against my chest as I guided her toward the reinforced glass entrance. Her body went rigid for a split second, the heat between us radiating through her silk dress like an electric current. "Marcus," I commanded, without turning back, "lock down the lower perimeter. Do not fire until they cross the lawn. I'll handle the team leader myself." I looked down at Vivian, my thumb lightly brushing against her hip bone. "You stay in the panic room, Vivian." End of story. She grabbed my tactical vest, her sharp hazel eyes burning into mine. "I'm not hiding in a box while you fight my battle, Gidan," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage, not fear. Arthur Sterling's personal laptop is in the lead SUV. His chief enforcer, Hector, carries the master encryption key on a hardware drive around his neck. I need that drive. If you kill him before I extract the decryption token, we lose the evidence. They breached the glass atrium 3 minutes later. Hector, a 6'2" killer with a scarred neck and a reputation for brutality, led the pack, assault rifle raised. "Where is the fat computer girl?" Hector roared, his voice echoing through the sunlit hallway. "Sterling wants her head, and he's paying $1 million for it. Big mistake. In my world, you can insult my nation, you can attack my firm, but the moment you disrespect the woman under my protection, you cease to be a human being. You become a target." I stepped out from behind the marble column before Hector could raise his rifle. One fluid motion. I grabbed the barrel of his weapon, twisted it until his wrist snapped, and drove my combat knife straight through his knee joint. He hit the floor, screaming in agony, blood pooling on the white marble under the bright afternoon sun. His 3 men raised their weapons, but Marcus and my tactical team opened fire from the upper balcony, dropping them in less than 4 seconds. I knelt beside Hector, grabbing him by the throat, pinning his 6-foot frame to the ground with one hand. His eyes bulged with pure terror as he looked into mine. Who the hell are you?" he choked out. "I'm the man Arthur Sterling couldn't afford," I whispered, coldness dripping from every syllable. Vivian walked out from the study. She didn't look at the blood. She didn't look at the fallen men. She walked straight up to Hector, knelt down, and ripped the silver hardware drive from around his neck. She stood up, her emerald silk dress glistening in the sunlight, looking down at the broken enforcer with utter disdain. "Tell Arthur Sterling that his entire net worth just cleared," she said calmly, "and tell him his security team failed." I stood up, walking behind her, wrapping my arm around her waist. I pulled her soft, curvy back firmly against my chest, feeling her rapid heartbeat. I leaned down, my lips brushing against her neck, my deep voice echoing right into her ear. "You were magnificent, my sweet genius," I whispered, my tone low, thick with possessive satisfaction. "Now, let's go finish Arthur Sterling once and for all." Suddenly, Marcus ran back into the hall, staring at his tablet with wide eyes. "Boss! Sterling just went live on national television from Wall Street. He's framing Vivian for high treason and cyber terrorism, and the FBI has just issued a shoot-on-sight warrant for her arrest. The media calls Wall Street the beating heart of world finance. I call it an arena of wolves in $10,000 suits." Arthur Sterling thought he could use a live television broadcast on CNBC to spin the narrative, branding Vivian Moreau as a cyber terrorist and weaponizing the FBI against her. He believed that by putting a shoot-on-sight warrant on a 25-year-old woman, he could force her into hiding forever. But Sterling made one fatal mistake. He thought Vivian was a victim running for her life. He didn't realize she was the executioner, and I was her vanguard. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the sun was blazing over lower Manhattan, casting razor-sharp shadows across the marble steps of the New York Stock Exchange. Sterling stood inside the glass atrium of his investment firm, surrounded by 60 reporters, dozens of cameras, and 20 armed federal agents acting as his personal shield. He was smiling. An arrogant, greasy smile of a man who thought he had outsmarted the law, the public, and the underworld in a single day. He walked up to the podium, adjusting his silk tie, looking straight into the news cameras. "The rogue hacker known as Vivian Moreau," Sterling proclaimed, his voice echoing across national television, "is an unstable, emotionally disturbed former employee who tried to extort $70 million from hard-working Americans. We will not be intimidated by a criminal who belongs in a federal prison." He didn't even get to finish his sentence. At 4:15, every single digital billboard in Times Square, every stock ticker on Wall Street, and every television broadcast across the United States went completely black for 3 seconds. Then, a crystal-clear, high-definition video feed replaced Sterling's face on live national TV. It was the decrypted master drive Vivian had taken from Hector's body in the Hamptons. On every screen in America, Arthur Sterling's voice played out loud, recorded 18 months ago during a private board meeting. "Deny the pension fund payouts to the dead workers' families," Sterling's recorded voice sneered through the speakers of every news network. "What are they going to do? Sue me? Let the fat computer girl whine all she wants. I own the federal judges in this district." The crowd outside the building went dead silent. The reporters froze. The FBI agents lowered their weapons, staring at Sterling in utter disbelief. That was the exact moment our convoy pulled up to the front entrance. 3 heavy armored black SUVs parted the crowd. I stepped out of the lead vehicle first. 6'4", bespoke black suit, no weapons drawn, just absolute, unyielding authority. Behind me, stepping out into the bright afternoon sunlight, was Vivian. She didn't wear a mask. She didn't hide behind dark sunglasses. She wore that vibrant, emerald green tailored dress that hugged every gorgeous, unapologetic curve of her body, her chin held high, her hazel eyes burning with the cold satisfaction of a queen taking back her crown. The crowd parted for us like the Red Sea. As we walked up the marble steps, 2 federal agents moved to block our path. I stepped into their line of sight, leaning down slightly, my voice dropping to a low, terrifying vibration that stopped them in their tracks. "You have 2 choices," I whispered, coldness dripping from every syllable. "You can arrest Arthur Sterling for 90 counts of wire fraud and grand larceny, or you can step aside and let me handle him myself." The lead agent looked at my tactical credentials, looked at the damning evidence playing on every screen in Manhattan, and slowly stepped out of the way. Sterling stood behind the podium, his face drained of all color, his hands shaking so violently he dropped his speech notes onto the floor. "Gidan," he stammered, backing away toward the glass elevator. "I paid your firm $500,000. You swore to protect my assets." I walked up the steps, stopping 3 feet from him, letting my physical presence loom over his shrinking frame. "My firm protects assets, Sterling," I said, my voice echoing through the silent atrium. "You are no longer an asset. You are a liability. And my contract with Miss Moreau supersedes everything you own." Vivian stepped up beside me. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't gloat. She pulled out a sleek silver tablet, tapped a single command, and held the screen up to Sterling's face. "That was the final override token, Arthur," she murmured softly, her velvet voice cutting deeper than a knife. "Your offshore accounts in Zurich, your shell corporations in Delaware, your penthouse in Manhattan, and your estate in the Hamptons have all been legally seized by the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Division. You don't have $70 million anymore. You don't even have 70 cents for a phone call." Sterling fell to his knees on the cold marble floor, sobbing as 2 federal agents stepped forward, clicked handcuffs around his wrists, and dragged him toward a waiting police cruiser in front of 50 live news cameras. Total, absolute, justified karma. As the sirens faded into the Manhattan traffic, Vivian stood on the top step, looking out at the sunlit city. The breeze blew her hair back, highlighting the sharp, proud line of her jaw and the radiance of her smile. I walked up behind her, placing my hand firmly on the small of her back, pulling her soft, lush curves flush against my side. She rested her head lightly against my shoulder, letting out a long, quiet breath she had been holding for years. "It's over, Gidan," she whispered. "I gave them their lives back." "The war against Sterling is over, Vivian," I replied, my voice low, thick with possessive pride as I looked down at her. "But your life with me is just beginning. In my world, a woman with your mind and your spirit doesn't just survive. She reigns." She looked up at me, a dangerous, beautiful smile touching her lips. "Is that a job offer, Commander? Or a permanent arrangement?" "It's a vow, mia cara," I whispered, leaning down until my breath brushed her cheek. "Because from this day forward, anyone who dares to cross your boundaries will have to go through me first." When a woman possesses the brilliance to destroy an empire and the pride to stand tall against the world, is it control to stand by her side, or is it the ultimate form of loyalty? What would you sacrifice to protect the only person who holds your soul?